Welcome to the inaugural ICC Asia-Pacific Mediation Competition, which has been held, as you're well aware, over the last couple of days and is now culminating with this final. And we're so pleased to be able to put this on and make it, well, have it as the success which you've all made it for us. I'm Brian Clark. I work for the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry as the Director of Trade and International Affairs, and I also operate the ICC operations in Australia and have been responsible in part for putting this together along with my team. And Haiti, that you variously met across the days, has done a tremendous amount of work putting it all on, and we hope that we've done a good job, and hopefully you've enjoyed it. So my first task is to introduce you to Mr. James Pearson, who's the Chief Executive for the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. James, if you'd come up to the front here. But the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry is also the National Committee for ICC in Australia, and so we operate it seamlessly within the operations of the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And so I'd now like to introduce James to say a few words of introduction.
Thank you, Brian, and good afternoon. It's a delight and an honour for me to acknowledge the presence today of His Honour Justice Clyde Croft and the family of the late Henry Jolson QC, Jerome Jolson, and his wife Casey. Also, I would like to thank the sponsors, and I really would like to thank the sponsors, because we all understand without the generosity, and it's not just measured in terms of cash, but it's also measured in terms of in-kind support, including a great deal of time, that makes events like this possible. And so I do want to acknowledge the Victorian Government, the Melbourne Commercial Arbitration and Mediation Centre, Cornwall Stoddart, the Resolution Institute, the Australian Government Attorney General's Department, the Australasian Dispute Resolution Centre, and the Victorian Bar. And I also want to acknowledge those judges, mediators and timekeepers who have given up a significant amount of their time over the last few days and culminating in this afternoon's final. Without your support, an event like this simply could not take place. So could you join me in acknowledging their efforts in the usual way? I want to acknowledge too the fact that we brought together in this inaugural competition teams from Australia, New Zealand, Singapore and India. I also want to acknowledge that the event takes place against the backdrop globally of an unprecedented challenge from some unexpected quarters to the concepts of globalisation, of open economies and free trade. And I would like to think that even in some very small way, the practical efforts and the training and experiences that have taken place over the last few days, they're a practical demonstration at a very tangible level of the day-to-day commitment that the countries whose teams represent them so well over the last few days have to those very, very important principles that have lifted so many of the world's peoples out of poverty at a time when these notions of globalisation and free trade are under threat. It's important that we are training and developing the skills and experience required to keep trade flowing, to keep trade happening, to making sure that disputes are capable of resolution in a peaceful and non-belligerent way. And so if in some small way, by coming together over the last few days and this afternoon, we all have made a contribution, then I think that's something that we should recognise. On with the show. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And now moving on, I'd like to introduce the teams, the judges and the mediator. So first of all, we have as the requesting team is from the National University of Singapore, is comprised of Mark Lim and Leanne Cheng. And their opponents are from the University of Auckland. They are the responding team, and they are comprised of Matthew Jackson and Tunisia Napier. And they'll be assisted today with the mediator, Dr. Paul Gibson, who is Australia's only accredited EU cross-border mediator. And we're joined with our 5 judges this afternoon, comprising of Alan Limbury, Peter Mcmullen, Delcy Lagons de Anglem, Donna Ross and Anne Sutherland Kelly, who are professional mediators with experience of over 25,000 mediations, and many hold academic appointments and international positions. So please welcome them as well.
I'm your mediator this afternoon. Please call me Paul. Can I just ask each of you to introduce yourselves to one another in terms of your roles in the mediation today?
Sure. So my name is Mark. I'm the Executive Director. I represent Space Tourism.
Hi, my name is Lian Ching. I'm Counsel for Space Tourism. You can call me Lian.
My name is Matthew Jackson. I am the Managing Director of Big Pharma, or BP.
My name is Tanissia Napia. I am in-house counsel for Big Pharma.
Thanks very much. Is it okay with everybody if we use first names?
Sure.
Yes.
Is that all right? Okay. Let me just explain my role as the mediator. I'm really here to facilitate a conversation between you about the issues and matters which divide you. And largely the way you go about that is up to you. I'll help you in any way that I can. On the contrary, my role is not to provide you with advice or to offer you with solutions. So even if you ask me nicely, I shan't do that. Let me just check that we have the authority at the table, should you move towards some resolution or authority, to make such agreement.
Yes, I definitely do.
You have full authority?
Yep.
And Matthew, thank you. I'm going to take it that you understand the protocols around breaks and caucuses and cross caucuses. Is that correct? Yes?
Yes.
So let me just reiterate the point, and I do this on every occasion, about mediation. 3 things. It's confidential, it's non-binding, and what you say across the table is without prejudice. And I say to people, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. So feel free within that container to have a conversation about issues, ideas, thoughts, suggestions, and understand that none of that is binding. It's all without prejudice until ultimately we might make an agreement. That's probably best done if it's done in a respectful way, you listen to one another, and you're frank and open. Are there any questions?
No, thank you.
None? Okay. Well, let's start. Over to you.
So if it's all right with you, maybe I could just start with a few opening comments as the
course.
requesting party. So in my opening statement, I just want to make 2 quick points because I'm sure we have a lot of things to get to really quickly. I want to share with you a little bit about myself and my company, and I think this is important in setting some context to what's important for us. And then I'd like to also share with you our perspective in terms of the common and mutual problem that I believe we're here to solve today. Right? So you might have heard this about me, Matthew. I'm one of those businessmen who grew up in a little bit of unfortunate circumstances. I didn't come from a wealthy family. I remember in my childhood, one of the biggest moments of my life was seeing the footage of the landing in the moon. I mean, for me, that was symbolic. It represented so much. It represented to me breaking away from the shackles of circumstances. It represented to me reaching new frontiers. And since then, I've always had that personal dream of having a role to play in something that exciting, to taking our journeys away from this earth towards outer space. And when I started my company, Space Tourism, that was specifically the motivation behind it. I wanted to set up a company that could achieve these great dreams, and my employees and colleagues share this dream with me. And I think that's really important in terms of backdrop behind what's important to us. This space mission is central to a lot of our goals and dreams, and we are really excited that this is an opportunity for us to get closer to getting this dream fulfilled. You probably heard of Neil Armstrong. He was the astronaut who first took the first step on the moon. he has a quote that's really famous, one small step for man, one great leap for mankind. Many people interpret this in many different ways. For me, this has always been a somber reminder that every step I take towards achieving any dreams or achievements I'm looking for cannot be taken at the expense of mankind. Mankind needs to follow along, maybe even exceed these steps that I take. And this is really the reason why we were so excited to form this partnership with your company, Matthew. Because at that point when we formed this agreement, and in fact even now, your company is really at the cutting edge of creating life-saving treatment and other forms of pharmaceutical medication. And we knew that if we wanted to take this step towards outer space, we wanted there to be this kind of great benefit to mankind, the ability to further scientific research. As we break the boundaries of travel, we also wanted to reach new frontiers, or at least have a part to play in reaching new frontiers for medical research and pharmaceutical research. So I think this brings us quite nicely to the issue that I believe we're here to resolve today. At the point when the agreement was signed between us, there was a lot of careful calibration to make sure that all the factors were in place. And one factor that was really important was sources of funding, because a project like this is extremely costly. And we took great pains to make sure that everything added up in terms of resources from sales to people wanting to travel on this, to loans from banks, to sponsorships or licensing deals. Everything added up perfectly. And it was a really nice equilibrium. I think the fact is that today when we meet, this equilibrium has shifted. Things have changed. And I think this is a great opportunity to us to talk about these changes. Specifically, there are two at this point that I'd just like to raise to illustrate this. The first is there has been this incident with Voltarol.
Riloxitol.
Sorry, Riloxitol. I apologize. Riloxitol. And I think this has resulted in a bit of a PR nightmare. And I'm sad to share that, unfortunately, at this point, my team has informed me that this PR controversy has led to some waning in interest in this project. And so that's definitely of a great concern to us, something we want to talk about. Another thing that really shocked me was to hear from your company that you might have intentions to withdraw from this project as well. I have to say that really surprised us, because we thought we had a great thing going, a great collaboration. For what it's worth, I observed, incidentally, we're even wearing the same tie. And I thought that this would be a really great opportunity. I thought that this was really positive and a great partnership. And I'm sure you had really good reasons, your employees and staff, for this perception. And I'm glad that we have this opportunity today to talk this out, to see if this project is possible to salvage, and more importantly, if this partnership between our two companies can continue. Not just to take for the steps towards profitability or commercial reality, but for the great leaps that we can bring to mankind and to the industry as well. So I'm really looking forward to this. Leanne, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So as you can see, this is a really important matter to my client because of both personal as well as commercial reasons. And that's why he's very committed to the process here today. I think the fact that Big Pharma is here as well also shows that you are equally committed to it. And if this is so, we believe that this is a really good basis for the mediation coming up ahead. So, unfortunately, we must recognize that there is a litigation backdrop to all of this. I think there are claims from both sides, and they involve pretty substantial amounts of money. But, I don't really want to dwell on the legal arguments so much because, Paul, I understand that the mediation table is not really a place for legal arguments. So I think suffice to say, for the claims themselves, they really are only directed at recovering the losses that would be caused to space tourism should the current state of affairs continue. And my client's consistent position on this is that it's always better to maximize benefit rather than calculate loss. And in that respect, if we are able to reach a better deal today, I think my client will be more than willing to discontinue the ongoing litigation. So in addition to wanting to maximize benefit, I think we have three other reasons why we believe that litigation is not an ideal solution for both space tourism as well as Big Pharma. So the first reason is really that litigation incurs a great deal of money. And this money could be better spent on other better uses. For example, for yourself, research and development. I think for ourselves, producing, developing, constructing the rocket. And the second reason is really that litigation is bad for both the company's reputations, yourself and as well for space tourism. I think it would not be ideal if you were to drag this out in public. And the third reason, and actually possibly the most important reason for us, is that litigation is a very acrimonious process. It really destroys the relationship between the parties. Especially, we started out from a place of collaboration and we were set to succeed, and now, we don't want to see this all fall away. So, with this, I think perhaps I could just quickly sum up what has been shared from our side. We have three main interests coming into mediation today. So the first one is that it's really important to my client to see that we complete the rocket project with the right partner. The second one is that we also want to maintain our reputation, both for my client personally as well as for the company. And third, for my client personally, I think it's very important to him that he makes a difference to society in all the work that he does. So, in light of this, we look forward to hearing your side as well, and we look forward to a productive mediation today.
Thanks, dear.
Well, thank you so much, Mark and Leanne, for your openings, and I want to thank you for inviting Big Pharma to come to mediation today. I see this as a great opportunity to resolve our differences, and just touching on something that you added, Mark, about your concern about our intentions to withdraw, I want to reassure you that that is something we want to avoid today, and we very much would still like to work with you on this rocket project.
That's awesome.
So my lawyer, Tunisia, has informed me of the need to be open and honest with you today. And she has said this will allow us to have a more productive discussion and move more quickly towards resolving this dispute. So with that in mind, and for your benefit, Paul, as well, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how I see the events have arisen and what Big Pharma needs today.
Yeah.
Now, Mark, I am the Managing Director of Big Pharma by title, but I am an innovator by calling. Paul, perhaps I can give you a bit of background to explain what I mean. I run a company that helps save people's lives. I am always looking for new ways to do this better. Imagine my delight then when you approached me, Mark, and proposed that we could embark on a journey into space together. Ever since I was young, I have had planets and stars on my bedroom ceiling, and I dreamt of being an astronaut. I very much shared that moment of enjoying Neil Armstrong landing on the moon.
Yeah.
Now, as you can see, the realities of life took over and I had to find a real job, but I jumped at the opportunity to relive my childhood dream when space tourism approached me, not only because of my love of space and innovation, but because this space lab is highly beneficial for Big Pharma and, in turn, healthcare for mankind. The zero-gravity environment allows control over variables that aren't able to be controlled on Earth and allows us to make rapid scientific advancements. But going into space involves risk and exploration, and the ride has turned out to be quite bumpy. I can only imagine that the process of going into space is slow and arduous and riddled with what we call in science learning curves. I have had a major learning curve of my own following the Relax Atoll incident, and I truly regret the impact that this has had on the project. The way I see it, we're in the same ship, Mark, and we have shared interests in three things. Firstly, and most importantly, innovating for mankind and creating healthcare and scientific solutions. Secondly, maintaining our respective reputations and public relations. So really there are two ways that we can move forward with this issue. Either we leave this room and have a fight in court about who pays for what. And as your counsel has very helpfully pointed out, there are many reasons why this isn't an attractive option. Or, as my preference would be, we can continue our dream and work together to find a solution to our mutual problems. With all of us here, and with Paul's help, not even the sky is the limit.
That's true.
It is true. In order to reach a resolution today, there are two things that Big Pharma needs from you. Firstly, it's to help realise the value of the €15 million investment that BP has invested in the project. And secondly, is to help restore and enhance BP's reputation. That is all I have to say for now, but I'll pass over to my lawyer, Tunisia, to outline the legal issues.
Thank you for sharing, Matthew. As you are well aware, Big Pharma's legal position is that space tourism is in breach of the sponsorship agreement. by not booking enough passengers. Space tourism should therefore return the 15 million euros that Big Pharma has already paid it. We are pleased that space tourism suggested coming to mediation. We haven't commenced proceedings yet, and we would prefer not to. Now, a court might order you to pay us some money, but it can't order you to work with us so that we can resolve our reputational issues. Bearing that in mind, Matthew understands that your interests can be better served if we work with the help of the mediator by speaking to each other directly across the table as potential partners in this confidential setting and with your commercial realities in mind. That's all I propose to say. My role here today is advisory only. The real work will have to be done between the two of you. Thank you. I'll pass back to you, Paul.
Perhaps, Paul, before we move to the agenda setting phase, Mark could take a few moments to respond to what has been said, if that's okay.
Sure.
Matthew, I really enjoyed listening to your opening statement because I think I realized that our similarities go much further than our ties. Yes. I think we obviously share a lot of common interests, a lot of common passion for space exploration, space travel. And I think commonality is always a good place to start. Yes. I've heard you and I've understood how, and I agree with you that Riloxitol and all of the controversy that arose out of it was something neither of us probably wanted. And you're right, it's probably something we really want to get resolved really quickly because it might be one thing that hinders a successful cooperation. I've also heard from you that there are other issues you'd like to discuss as well, including some form of realization of the investment that your company has put into our company. We can talk more about that. I have to just say at this point though that I probably need to ask a bit more questions about what this return of investment looks like to you, but I'm sure that's something we can get sorted out along the way. So I'm very positive. I think both our legal counsel are probably on the same page that there's probably a lot more opportunities for us here at this table than in a courtroom. So I think it's good if we can probably try to stay clear away from the legal arguments for the rest of this session.
Yes, that would be my preference as well.
Yeah, great, awesome. So I think at this stage, Paul, maybe we can move on to setting an agenda for this session.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, so actually based on what I've heard that I think this probably will be quite a straightforward process because a lot of what we want to discuss are really similar. So if it's all right with you, I've taken the liberty of thinking out of a possible structure of how we can proceed on this. And of course, this is just a structure and we can, of course, modify it however you wish or add to it. So I think really there are just 4 points that seem like we both want to talk about. The first is about the Riloxitol incident. And I think we've both agreed this is something we want to work on to resolve together. And so we probably need to talk about it together as well. Right? And the second issue is probably about project financing. Money was something you mentioned to be really important, the investment that you put in. Money is important to us too, because financing is central to achieving this project's success. So it makes sense for us to talk about that as well. Thirdly, we want to talk about a rocket, because at this point, I think there are some decisions that can be made about how we might possibly modify the rocket or modify the plans that we have for the rocket, which might be able to better meet our interests. Because at this point, we are proceeding on a dual-purpose rocket, and that's something we can talk about if it's all right with you. And finally, if we manage to achieve achievement and agreement on all of this, we can look at how we can use all of these agreements these agreements to reach to further our reputation together. Does this sound like a structure that you might be comfortable with?
There was a lot of information in that,
Right.
So if I may distill, I did hear you, I believe, say that you would like to talk about the incident, the financing and the rocket.
Incident, financing, rocket, that's right, and reputation.
And reputation.
Yep.
Yes, so those are some of the things that you would like to discuss, Matthew. More broadly, perhaps just for the purposes of setting an agenda, combining the two aspects of the financing and the rocket and just calling it the rocket project.
Sure, we're all right with that. Sure. Yeah.
In terms of the incident, there are other business issues at play in the wider world of Big Pharma and of your company as well. And so perhaps another, rather than the incident, could have a broader point on business. So,
Could I just clarify at this point, when you say incident, you're referring to the Reloxitol incident?
yes.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yes. And you mentioned there are some other things you'd like to discuss.
And reputation. Matthew, that's something that you would like to discuss as well.
Yes.
So actually, on the first point, which you said you want to probably use the broader header
Yes.
of business, we're okay discussing more issues. That makes sense to us. But it's a bit hard to commit to an agenda if we don't know what's going to be in it. So maybe could you share with us, just very broadly, what are some of the other instances you'd like to talk about under the business header?
Of course. So, in terms of the business heading, the things that I'd really like to know is perhaps a bit more about your future business plans and what your broader goals are, both with the rocket project that we're working on together at present and other initiatives. And then we can perhaps share our respective innovations that we might be working on. So really just to get a better idea of where we're both at respectively at this point in time.
Okay.
And
Well, sure, we can talk about all of these things. If they're important to you, they're important to us as well.
fantastic, thank you.
Can I just clarify, do you mean innovations broadly or innovations related to the rocket project?
More broadly.
Okay.
Broadly. Paul, therefore, if it's okay with you, could we head up those items on the board there as business, the rocket project?
So maybe my counsel can write it on the board, unless Mr. Paul, you have other suggestions?
My handwriting is terrible, please feel free.
Hers is
Please
great.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, Leah.
So that was what we came up with together was the rocket project, business, reputation. Is there anything else? No, we brought those together. Yes, thank you.
Sure, and we're okay with those items, but perhaps in terms of order, we'd really like to start off talking about the business, because I think at this point, I don't mean to, drive a spanner into the cogs. But at this point, we really have to think deep about how this partnership is going to progress. And I think these business issues that you've raised form important context behind any kind of decisions we can make down the road. Do you think we could start with the second point on business
Just
first?
before we do that, I understood that you wanted innovations added to the list.
Oh, so business and innovation can encompass the same
come together.
matter.
Business and
So,
innovation.
so you're happy with those three items?
Yes,
Personally,
thank you.
I'm
Would you
happy
like
with that.
would you like innovation on the board as well? Or
No,
with
that's fine
business?
as long as we know that we'll discuss that there. And Mark, with regards to discussing business first, I actually think that would be quite wise, because that's more broadly something where we don't have as much of a dispute. So I'd really like to try and build some common ground and some mutual understanding before we get into the more nitty-gritty of what's brought us here today.
Exactly, yeah. So in terms of, Paul, maybe now we're going to move to the first point of the agenda.
It's your conversation. You move it which way you want.
Okay, cool. And I just want to pick up on something that you said in your opening, Matthew, about how you are committed to keeping this truthful and transparent. And I just want to give you this assurance at this point, as we start talking about the difficult questions, that we are likewise committed to be truthful. I think that we envision this agreement as a partnership, and partnership requires trust. And so I think this is just a good starting point that I'd like to raise. I think at this point, what we'd really like to find out first is about what we've called the Reloxitol incident. At this point, the information that we have has mostly been from the press, which we know isn't really the best place for information. So do you think we could hear firsthand from you about broadly what this incident entails?
Yes, so if I can just elaborate, mostly what has been in the press has been accurately recorded, and it's been quite an unfortunate event, which has been actually quite out of kilter with our traditional reputation of producing essential medicines that are of a high quality and can be trusted by the general public. So really with that Reloxitol incident, there were some unfortunate and unintended side effects of the medication for the condition that it was to treat, but that product has been withdrawn, yes.
So it's off the shelves now.
Yes, and we've been trying quite hard to reinstate our reputation and try and recover from that incident.
I see.
Yes.
Do you think you could share with me a bit more about what this effect on your reputation has been like? So has it, for instance, affected sales elsewhere, or anything like that?
Well, if I'm being perfectly candid, with a lot of our products, they are originator medicines, and what that means is that we are the sole provider of those medicines. So they are high quality and they are essential for a lot of conditions, so we haven't seen as much of an effect on those.
Okay.
But what we have understood is that there are some people in the public who are concerned about that, and
Yes.
it seems that a lot of your customers have a feeling that that isn't something they want to be linked with. Can you tell us a little bit more about how they're feeling?
Sure.
No, I
Maybe my counsel will explain.
Yeah, so I'm hearing from you that really your concern is with reputation and it's about public perception rather than the financial aspects of the matter. Would I be correct in saying that?
It is, and really, we're here to further humankind and make sure that a lot of people don't have to suffer through horrendous medical conditions. We want to help, and any perception otherwise is quite hurtful for us. So we want to ensure that that is ameliorated.
Right. So you asked me about the effect this has had on our projected interest in the project as well.
Yes.
So the direct answer is that yes, unfortunately, the ripple effects have hit us. So whereas previously we were able to predict and project a lot of people being interested in using our idea to travel into space, I think increasingly there has been some reservations. It's a bit early to say for sure and give you concrete statistics, but definitely in terms of the people who have already paid their down payments, already indicated their interest, at least at this point, they've indicated their intention to withdraw. So that's something of concern to us. And so we're wondering, because evidently the unfortunate and definitely unexpected effect of this controversy have affected both of us, we were wondering whether your team had any plans at this point already in place to address this PR situation, apart from just pulling off the shelves.
Look, where my client's coming from in this concern about reputation, to be perfectly candid, is less about his business, because it is doing quite well.
Oh, okay.
What Matthew is here to do is to see how he can help you, because he understands the impact that this has had on this project. He's very invested in this project, as you are, and so if you've got any ideas on how that can be fixed in terms of the project, that is something that we'd certainly be interested in coming back to.
Yes, and I'm very concerned about those 20 customers, I understand it, who have already made their deposits.
20.
What I'd like to get an understanding of is perhaps if there are particular individuals in that group who have a concern, or whether what that particular concern is, and whether we might be able to help with that.
So, I think we're definitely glad to hear that you are concerned with the reputation of our project. That was, something that we're very glad to hear. Perhaps, Mark, do you think we should go on to discussing how Big Pharma could then help us with our reputation issue?
Yeah, I think let's pick on that. We really appreciate that at this point it really looks like as though we are taking these individual problems as collective ones that we're here to solve together. I'm really happy to hear from your counsel that this hasn't affected your business entirely. I think this is probably a testament to how well your team has managed it, because typically these incidences cause a huge controversy. So that's good to know. You asked me about what that especially you could help us with. And while we're in the interest of being candid here, really it comes down at this stage where we're developing the rocket and the project to financing. So you asked me earlier, Matthew, about the specific individuals who have withdrew their interest, and you asked me if I knew anything specific. The direct answer is at this stage, no. I think there has just been a general broad controversy surrounding this incident, and the fact that our rocket is called Big Pharma has resulted in some people feeling uncomfortable. I'm just wondering if you might be interested to hear about how my team has considered how we will address the situation, and then we can discuss how maybe you could help with that as well.
Yes, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
So, just for my benefit, are you discussing this under business, or are you discussing this under reputation?
I think this is probably under business.
Okay.
Yeah. So, the reason why this falls under business is because I think at this stage our business is centered around the financing, and so when in my opening statement I referred to a careful equilibrium, a calibration of different sources of funding to make up a total amount that we require for this project, rocket project. Actually, I noticed that you look like you might have some concern. Do you maybe want to raise them first?
Look, Paul, to be honest, I'm hearing first we're talking about reputation, and Matthew and I have acknowledged that your reputation is important to us, and you've said quite broadly that your customers are cancelling bookings, and that has to do with the reputation of Big Pharma. However, you've jumped straight from there into solutions on reputation having to do with financials and so. I'm kind of wondering what the link is there, or is there something else? Is the concern with this rocket project more to do with finance than with reputation?
Well, I think perhaps I could clarify a little bit and explain. The link between reputation and finance is because one of the sources of our finance is from passenger down payments. So our reputation affects who wants to come on the trip to space, and that affects the amount of down payments we have. So I think, does that sufficiently provide the link you're looking for?
That does, thank you. So if I'm understanding correctly then, the reputation matter, we have gone through that and we have established that our reputation is important for your business. So yes, if you want to go on to talk about, Matthew, were you comfortable with talking about business or with the project?
I would like to talk about financing, and I was wondering if there were any other financial issues apart from those that are directly linked to the reputation of BP and the customer bookings.
So, I'm hearing we're moving on to a different point of project financing. Perhaps before we move there, I could quickly summarize what we have covered so far, just to make sure we're on the same page. Is that okay?
I think, yes, that's fine.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I think, firstly, we found out more from you about the Reloxitol incident, about what was the incident about, and I think more importantly, what was the effect on your company. And I think you mentioned something about public trust, about perception. And I think on our end, we also explained what is the impact of the incident on our project, and specifically the reputation of our project. I think we've briefly covered that, it's because fewer passengers want to pay their down payments, they're requesting to withdraw them. And because, that's why we linked reputation to financing. And now we're talking about the financial matters.
Yeah. Actually, at this point, while we're moving on to financing, Leanne, do you think it would be helpful to just put on the board the different sources of financing, and that way we can avoid this kind of confusion about how each point links to each other?
So would that be all right with you?
Actually, Matthew is quite clear on the different sources of financing. So,
yes.
Paul, I think it would be more useful for us to move more quickly onto other things.
So my question really is, I am aware of the different sources or the calibration of different sources of financing. I am familiar with the arrangement that has been in place. I'm just wondering if, in addition to reputation, there are any other financial issues with the project at present.
So when you mention financial issues, you're asking me if perhaps the other sources of funding have had issues? Is that what you're saying?
Perhaps, yes.
Okay. Well, maybe you can tell them a bit about how there has been some changes, in the spirit of full disclosure in our projected costs. My lawyer will explain this to you because she's worked closely with the accountant.
That's fine.
Yeah. So, just to recap a little bit, the initial projected cost of the project was $50 million. So currently, you asked us if there have been any changes, and the answer, in all openness, is yes. So the projected cost has gone up to, we need about maybe 45 million more. But, if certain changes were made to the rocket, which we could discuss further, it could drop to about 35 million more. Yeah.
So actually, I'm very interested to, explore a bit about the context behind how this question that you gave us arose. Because, as I mentioned in my opening statement, I had some initial concerns that your company had some intentions to withdraw from this project. You've given me the assurances that that's not the case anymore. But at this point, you're asking me a lot about the financial situation, and you've explained this is important because you like to help us. I think I'd just like to tie the loose ends here.
Yes.
Moving forward, it's probably not a good idea to ignore the circumstances with which you made the decision to inform us of your intention to withdraw. Okay, the short answer, I realize this might have been a bit convoluted. You must have had good reasons why you wanted to withdraw in the past. Maybe if you could share them with us now, we can make sure these concerns are addressed as well.
Look, my client's position on not withdrawing is not set in stone at this stage.
Yeah.
And actually there are some concerns with that financial aspect that I feel are being skirted around a little bit.
Sure, so tell us what you want to know, because at this point things are pretty broad and it's a bit hard to pinpoint.
So initially, the project was estimated to be 50 million euros.
That's right.
For investment. Now you've told us that it's 45 or 35 million more. Now, I understand that you're at the prototype phase.
Yep.
And currently at the prototype phase, you're at 30 million out of that original 50 million. And I'm wondering, Matthew, what your thoughts are around that.
Well,
And
I mean, I just want to emphasise that that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be withdrawing from this project, but what I really want to know is having a full picture of what the circumstance is. And as I mentioned earlier, I have already invested 15 million euros in this project, which is no small amount of money.
That's right.
So I just really want to have a clear idea of what is needed to get it to full completion. And really, my interest is in having that lab working as well, because that will help us to produce world-class, cutting-edge pharmaceuticals that will help mankind.
Right.
You know, I like how this discussion is going. Perhaps I could just make a quick clarification, and this is really, I apologize for this. There's been a bit of a mix-up in the numbers. So I know I mentioned 35 to 45 million. The actual figure is 20 to 30 million. So my apologies for that. So does this change your concerns about the...
Well, my concern is that still the cost is higher than what was anticipated, and obviously if the forecast has changed, there are factors behind that, so I'd like to know what those factors are, just to be full and open about that.
Okay, so I'm hearing you want to know about why the cost has increased.
Yes.
You know, I remember our previous question was actually what were your concerns in the past for your decision to withdraw? And you know, since this cost issue is something that has just come up, perhaps you could explain to us the other reasons for other concerns that you might have had before this.
Well, in terms of other reasons, that was really just a response to some of the other communications that we had, and there was indication that that your company was going to be pulling the plug on the project, and that was really a response to that, and we were concerned about that. That's why we made that communication, and it wasn't as much about any particular concerns with the project. But really, I'd like to know about what financial factors, what factors are affecting that $20 to $30 million increase.
Okay, well, for what it's worth, I'm really glad to hear that, at least at this point, it looks like there was a bit of a miscommunication. So on your end, you probably heard that we intended to pull the plug. That's definitely not our intention at this point. On our end, we heard that you might be intending to withdraw. I think you've indicated, and your counsel have, of course, caveated it, that at this point you're positive about continuing forward. Let me give you the answers to the questions you've been looking for. So you've asked us what has resulted in this increase in cost. Really has been a range of factors. And although I know your counsel has said that you're really well familiar with the breakdown, I'd really prefer if my lawyer put it on the board, just so that everyone can visually see what has increased, what has not.
Is this a breakdown of the existing and initial sources of funding, or is it of
no,
the
it's what we expected when we first negotiated the contract.
Is this any new information to us? Because if it is not, if it's things we already know, I'd rather that we move forward.
Well, I think you know, this will really help my client in his explanation as well to you about why the cost has increased. So perhaps if it's all right with you, you could just very, very quickly put it on the board.
Yes, I think that would aid our mutual understanding. So go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
So in the meantime, while she's going to be writing that on the board, I've just been a bit curious to discuss. Because you mentioned a reputation, and I know this is something we've talked about in the past, it's going to be something we'll talk about more in options. I just don't want to waste this time while she's writing it on the board.
It's my preference, Paul. I feel like I'm not being heard about my concerns about why there is an increase in cost. And I feel like I'm trying to get my questions answered, and I'd rather not move on from that.
Okay,
do you have any recommendations about how we can move past this impasse?
Okay, so why don't we just wait till the numbers go on the board?
Yes, I'm sure
that
that'll
we
be
have the conversation. Yeah?
comfortable. Yes.
Look, another suggestion is actually I'm hearing a lot of I want to talk about this, or your question was, if you could just, it would help Matthew if you could just answer without reference to what the question's already been asked, just so that we can move forward a bit quicker.
Well, okay, I think I'm sorry if you've been a bit frustrated by the way that I've been answering the questions. I'm really happy that you're raising that now. I'll do my best. Let's try to keep this positive and moving forward, all right?
Can I just add, I feel like this information is what I'm already aware of, and this doesn't account for the increase of $20 to $30 million in expected cost to complete the project. So Paul, again, I feel like my question hasn't been answered, and this is really preventing me from collaborating here. I feel like I'm not being listened to. And it's not because I have any intention to pull out, which I know you're concerned about, but I just really want to know what the lay of the land is.
Yep.
Paul, how can we move past this?
So we're going to now use this and explain it, because that's the way we intended to move forward.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me just quickly explain what this diagram means. Basically, it explains that we have three sources of funding, and on the middle column is the amount we'd expected to obtain from each source. And on the rightmost column, that's the amount that we actually obtained from each source. So, I'm hearing that your question is really, why has there been an increase in cost? And I think, relating to how their projections, Mark, do you want to explain to them why their costs have increased? Because I think this is not really a very big issue. We'd like to get past it also.
So let me just see if we've got the question right, yeah? The project, as I understand, was going to cost 50 million euros. Yeah. What I've heard you say, Leanne, is that on top of that, in addition to that, you are projecting somewhere between an extra 20 to 30 million euros.
Yes, that's
is that correct?
Paul, yes.
And your question, Matthew, is can you please understand what that 20 or 30 million extra euros is for? Is that the question you're trying to get to the bottom of?
That's very much my question, yes.
Okay. So, Mark, I wonder whether you're able to address that, because it's not the sources of funding that Matthew wants to hear about. He wants to hear about why the extra 20 to 30 million euros is required.
Right. Well, the short answer, and I know this might not be something that you'll be very happy to hear.
It's okay, just say.
Is that I don't know the specifics.
Okay.
Right? The reason behind this is because in the beginning we make certain projections. These projections are based on the market realities at that time. They factor in a bunch of different conditions, including things like cost of materials, cost of regulatory approval. The fact is that at this point of time, that amount has increased by this amount. If you really require the specificities of this increase, I'm afraid we might not be able to move forward simply because I don't have that information. I can get my accountant to get back to you.
No, that's fine.
And I want to show you I'm not lying to you. I'm not trying to hide anything from you.
I realise that you're being honest, and I'm happy to have a further breakdown of that just so I have a full picture in my mind, but as long as I know that that's the figure. Thank you for clarifying.
So that I would be comfortable with you leaving this financial topic here, Matthew, I just have one more question for you. Did you know before the contract was signed that 50 million is not how much the project would likely cost?
So you're asking me, did I deliberately mislead your clients?
I'm asking you if you knew whether it was not 50 million.
No, it was a very genuine estimate of what it was.
That's fine. I just wanted to check that. Matthew, would you be happy to move on now?
Yes, and I feel like I'd like maybe just a bit of a recap to us here about where we're tracking with these three issues, because I feel like it's gotten a bit muddled.
Yes.
Obviously the issues are very interlinked, but we've gotten a bit lost, I think.
Okay, look, what I've heard from the five of us, really, is that reputation is important to both of you. You both want to continue this project if you can. Neither of you ever had intentions to pull it, if at all possible. So the issue that we've identified so far is funding. That's the first one. The second one is reputation, because that is what's going to bring in the clients who are going to continue to fly. So moving on from that, let's perhaps explore any other business interests if that's what you want to do. But moving on from there, it would be a good idea perhaps, Paul, if you could think about what the two of you can do together to address those two concerns that you've identified.
Certainly.
Thank you for that great summary. I think you identified two issues, the funding and the reputation. And I'm glad we're moving forward to look now at how we can address these issues. Before we do that, would it be all right with you if we had a private session with Paul first?
Of course.
Of course.
Sure. So if you just leave the room.
Oh, that's no escort.
So this is a confidential conversation. Unless you instruct me otherwise, I'll say nothing about this.
Certainly, sure. So the reason why I called this caucus, Paul, is because I think we've reached a bit of frustration in terms of communication between the two of us. I find it a bit difficult, and I'm not really sure why, to communicate the deep concerns that I have, and I suspect that they have some concerns as well, which we haven't been able to understand. So I felt this caucus was important for us to seek your advice. So perhaps I could share with you the concern that we have, and then a concern that we've been trying to address, and maybe we could get your advice there. So the concern that we have really has got to do with their reputation. They've told us about how a drug that they've created has resulted in a great backlash. And I think in their opening statement they used terms like how they really regret it, and it seemed like a really big deal. But at the same time, their lawyers seem to explain it away as something that has really not affected them at all anymore. They said that none of the other products were affected. And to be honest, I find that a bit hard to understand, and I don't want to ask further if it might look like as though I'm casting doubt on their explanation. But this is really important to us because they are going to be one of the major sponsors, financial providers of our project if it succeeds. And if their finances are not as we understand it, I suspect that might lead to problems down the road. I think the second communication problem that, maybe problem's the wrong word, the second communication issue that we've observed is this idea of what did we know at the point in time when we contracted with them, and whether we had tried to hide anything. So the truth is that we didn't hide anything, but at this stage there is actually a competitor on the market that is providing a similar service insofar as that they're allowing passengers to go to space. And we suspect that the introduction of this competitor might be a relevant consideration for us to discuss. But at the same time, I'm a bit hesitant to share it with them unless they specifically ask for it, because their counsel seemed to be a bit resistant when I tried to bring up new ideas that I think are relevant that may not be fitting in with their questions.
So what do you think the risk is of you telling them about the competitor?
Right. I think the risk is actually quite low, simply because as business partners, we probably need to know about competitors in the market so that we can work together to find solutions. I'm really worried that if they hear it, they'll think like we've been hiding this information from them and only releasing it now, because that seemed to be a concern that they had.
Yeah, so to add on to what Mark mentioned about them feeling as if we've been hiding information from them, I think one additional concern is that we don't want this to dampen the interest in the project, because while there has been a competitor, we have also come up with possible solutions for how to tackle this issue. So perhaps, Paul, you could help us to first, as we introduce it, make sure that it doesn't come across as us hiding anything from them. And the second thing is to perhaps move it beyond just focusing on the negative aspect of a new competitor to focusing on what we can do to address this issue.
So it seems that you need to do both things.
Yeah?
That's right.
But what you're telling me, Mark, is that the risk of divulging it is low.
That's right.
Yes?
Hopefully, yes.
Right. And yet you've also said that the way to develop trust is through honesty.
Yep.
So maybe you could frame it that way and divulge it. Is it going to affect your part of the business, or is it going to affect their interest in the business? Because they're interested in testing things in space, yeah? You're interested in taking people into space.
Well, our interest is really just going to space.
Okay.
We don't really need people to be going. We are perfectly happy if it's just a research lab.
Okay.
Yeah. So our interest is really just in ensuring there's sufficient funding for this project.
Okay. So why not work on that?
Okay, so I think that's really helpful in terms of addressing this issue of the competitor. But my earlier concern, I'd like to discuss with you a bit further about this issue
You've only got 1 minute.
Sure. About this issue of reputation and the damage caused after the controversy. Do you have any advice on how we could possibly raise this to them without looking like as though we don't accept their explanation?
Haven't you already divulged the fact that whatever down payments were made, you no longer have? Haven't you divulged that?
Yes, we have told them, but to clarify, it's not that we don't have them any longer, it's just that the customers are requesting a refund.
It's the same thing. It's just a question of where the cash is, isn't it?
Well, I mean, there is a possibility of us keeping the money should certain arrangements be made.
I think maybe because we're running out of time, maybe we don't want to take the risk of them walking in.
That's time, guys.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Well, thank you for your help. I think we have some things that we're going to work on after this.
Okay. So there's nothing I'm going to divulge, okay?
Thank you.
Okay,
Sure.
thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you for your indulgence. Perhaps, Mark, you'd like to pick it up from where it was, given that you asked for the caucus. Yeah.
Yes. So I think just before the caucus, we had a bit of tension because of this idea of when information should be released and how it should be released, and in response to what question. And I apologize for that tension at this stage. So there is actually one thing we'd like to share with you that's probably really important. And that is that we've discovered that there's actually a new competitor on the market who is in the planning stages of creating a project that's similar to ours, insofar as that it will introduce the idea of being able to take people to space for holidays. The difference is that there is no lab aspect to this project. It's really purely just for space travel. The reason why I think this is important for us to consider at this stage, and this really links to the point on the rocket project, is because we have to make some decisions about whether we want to function as a competitor to this new company. If we maintain our present system of being a dual function rocket, at least one of the two functions will be in direct competition. And so, just as a preliminary point, could we just ask you, what is the significance of the travel function of the dual function project to you as a
passenger function?
Sorry, the
so
passenger
more of the tourism
function.
passenger.
Is it important to you?
Well, personally, as the managing director of BP, our main concern is the research, really, and that is actually something I'd like to share with you as well.
Okay.
It's actually particularly important to us because we're actually developing a groundbreaking new drug, which is an anti-malaria drug. It's to be called Melorol, and really, in terms of getting that to market, the key thing that we need is being able to test that in the zero-gravity environment, and that's really what our key interest is in that rocket ship, and we're working on that in partnership with the university, so they're doing research and development on that.
Okay.
So that's our main interest, but obviously you're a space tourism company, so that's obviously your main interest, and that's what we're here to hear about as well. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about what competitive factors are influencing that.
It sounds to me like we're heading into the realm of actually a culmination of business in the rocket project. So it sounds like your shared interest in future business is actually around the rocket project, just to identify that there. Would you mind actually if I just write on the board a little bit about that? Thank you. Just so that you can see where we are right now. This is some good progress.
And on that point, I just want to clarify something you mentioned earlier. Although we are called space tourism, I think it's important to note that really our interest is not so much in tourism, it's really just to go to space. And I mentioned a bit about this in my opening statement. So in my mind, space tourism, in terms of passengers on board, is really just a means of co-financing. So over time, the passengers will pay a certain amount, and this will cover the day-to-day running of the rocket ship. So really, if we were to be able to find an alternative means of financing, we'll be open to that idea as well. I think just to clarify on that point. So you wanted to share something on the... just circle. Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? So in terms of your strategic priority, is there one which is a preference? So are you saying that if you didn't have to have tourism and selling seats, you wouldn't want to? Or is that that's not what my reading is? Yeah.
Right. So we are actually open to two ideas. Either having a rocket ship that's purely dedicated to scientific research, which would be a difference from what we have today.
Yes.
Or in the alternative, the status quo, which is having a rocket ship with both tourists, passengers, as well as space research. And the reason why I'm explaining this to you is because I think it links to what our core interest is, which is to have a project that can go to space. It's really that simple.
Yes, it is.
And so to go to space, we need to consider all kinds of costs. And this links to passengers. We just saw it as a means of co-financing in the past.
So I think there are a lot of ideas that are being introduced, new like costs, like mutual interests. Perhaps I could just quickly summarize what information we've been sharing so far, so we can see how we can next move the discussion.
If I'm honest, I still have a few more questions on that matter, if you don't mind me continuing. In terms of the entrance or the emergence of this new competitor, how does that change it for you? I want to know a little bit more, and really, how can we help?
You know, I hear that you want to know more about the competitor. We are willing to share that. But Paul, you know, I feel like we have been jumping a lot around different issues. Perhaps, do you think you could help us to structure the discussion a little bit so we're all a bit clearer about where we are?
I think you're doing a good job as you're going.
And in that case, Paul, would you mind, because there has been a lot of information shared just in these last few minutes, could you help us to identify some of the common interests that did come out of that?
Well, you seem to have a common interest in wanting to take a rocket into space. What I'm hearing you say is that there are two options. One is that you have a laboratory-only rocket. The other is you combine the dual use, like the status quo, as you describe it, yeah? But I think the sense that you're giving to BP is that you would be happy to work with a research-only rocket if you could find a way of making it work from a financial perspective.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that right?
Yeah. Thanks, Paul, for that. I think then maybe there are two issues we would like to discuss.
Well, sorry, just before we do that,
That clears it up to me, but I'd also like to have my question answered. I'd like to just know, how does this emergence of the competitor affect the business?
That will be one of the two, I assure you on that. So the first one will be the competitor. The second one will be possibly the possibility of changing the nature of the rocket from a dual use to a sole space laboratory. Could we perhaps go in that order just to make us clearer what we're talking
So
about?
we're going to answer your question.
Yes, that's fine. Yes.
Okay.
Maybe there's a bit of difference in communication, and that has led to some tension. I really hope that we can just understand that we like to operate from a position, from a really structured point of view, and that is really the only reason why we do these structures. So directly answering your question now, how does the space competitor affect anything? Simply put, if we were to continue on the status quo model, where passengers are a means of co-financing, the introduction of a competitor might mean that this co-financing option becomes different. We have to consider the repercussions of a competitor in terms of pricing, so it might not be as strong an option for co-financing. We might have to divert resources to advertising to make it stronger. And this does this answer the question that you're asking?
Yes, that's helpful to understand. Thank you. So perhaps you'd like to elaborate now on that second point?
Yes.
Yep, so we're talking about the possibility of converting to a sole space laboratory. I think before we consider the options, perhaps we would like to find out a bit more from you actually about what you think about expanding the area provided for research and development, because you mentioned your interest in going to space is really to further your research and development.
The anti-malaria drug, maybe this might be a time to explore more about that, to see which of the two proposals we raise would be more suitable.
Yes, that's very interesting. So we should come back to that. I'm wondering as well, in terms of perhaps wanting to move to a full scientific lab workshop, are there any concerns about the viability more broadly of having customers on the flights as well?
Well, Paul, I noticed that my question hasn't actually been answered. So we had two questions. One would be about the drug, the new drug you've developed, and the second one is about what you think about expanding the area available for research and development. So, I heard you ask that you wanted to know about the possibility of introducing passengers as well. Could we perhaps, would it be okay if you answered our questions first and then we could go back to what you mentioned as well?
My answer to that question is yes, I'd be very interested in looking at that. And my question was, in fact, are there any other issues with viability of the customers, having customers and tourists on the plane, broader than the entrance of competition? And how can I help you, really?
Well, you're right. I think we're entering into this project together. Having a competitor on the market would probably mean that a small pool of people who have that $5 million to spend on a holiday would probably not increase, but the supply of seats available for these people would. And this would probably mean that we might not be able to fill the seats, or in the alternative, we might have to offer cheaper seats to compete. And so this goes back to what I mentioned earlier about how this drastically changes how we look at this option as a co-financing option. And so this is really the reason why we've been very eager to discuss how, although we can work with the co-financing model and try to make it work, we also want to gather information to see if the alternative model might be more viable. So the alternative model being a space rocket specifically targeted at scientific research. And this is really the reason why we want to find out about this malaria drug you're creating.
Okay. What would you like to know about the malaria drug?
Yeah.
Right. So you said that this is a new project. It must take place in space. Does this? Do you see this project utilizing the entire space rocket?
That's certainly an option, and really whatever will actually help us to get to that product to market, because I'm not sure if you're aware, but malaria kills 430,000 people worldwide every year. It's horrendous. So that's really our priority in terms of a next step for furthering medicine. So, I'm certainly open to that option if that can be viable.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that actually this option would probably be really important to you because it provides the crucial laboratory in space that's required for your research.
I might just add,
Yes.
in terms of the arrangement with the current layout with passenger and lab, that would also serve it. So it's not necessarily important to me, but it would serve my interest.
So let's park that option for now and come back to it when we can. But just to understand better where this idea has come from your end, what would it take to make that kind of idea viable?
Sorry, which idea, Leanne?
The idea of the
Single
lab,
space rocket.
yeah.
Just a lab-only rocket?
Yes,
Yeah,
the single
okay.
space rocket.
Do you mean that in terms of cost?
In terms of cost, because I heard you express earlier that because you've got customers under the current model, that's where some of the money would be coming from.
Well, not at this point.
Yes, in the planned current model.
Hopefully in the future.
So what would you need to make this alternative where you don't have these customers viable?
You know, perhaps I could explain a bit more on this point since I'm quite familiar with the numbers. You mentioned what would it take, so basically the cost. We mentioned just now about the increase by 30 and 20 million. So this option actually is the 20 million option.
Okay.
So the total cost would then be 70 million. And what we need actually would be first this increase of the... So what we need actually basically is the 70 million. To obtain this, we've already got the 15 million from you. We've got down payments and sponsored and the bank loan. So in the event that we change to a sole laboratory, we would need to repay, return the down payments. We would need funding to repay the bank loan because initially these were expected to be repaid from the profits of the tourism side of things. So I hope this answers your question about what would it take.
So if I can just clarify, so you did mention that $20 million increase in costs a few moments ago, and my initial understanding was that was irrespective of how we changed the product, to that if we were continuing as originally planned, it would increase in price. Are you telling me now that the original plan would be able to be completed within $50 million?
No, so I mentioned just now two figures, 20 and 30, if you recall. So the 30 is if we stick to the original plan, and the additional 20 is if we change it to a sole use laboratory.
Okay.
Is that clear?
So basically, if we include a passenger element, it will cost $10 million more. 20 million more. Yeah.
Okay. If I might just add, my concern with that is it sounds like a fantastic option. I'm just wondering because I know that the reason why you had the tourism in the first place was to cover the costs of operating the rocket ship, which can be rather expensive.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if you had any other ideas about how those costs might be covered.
Yeah. So I think just to put everything in context so that perhaps we can just discuss it in a very focused commercial manner. At this point in time, there is a money issue. The rocket will not be completed if we don't do anything about it.
Okay.
So we are engaging you at this point to see which options would probably most be able to fit our mutual interest of having this project succeed.
Okay.
Okay.
So the two options, and just to use a bit of commercial speak, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yes, I'm also a business person, so I can understand.
Great. So it really comes down to fixed costs and variable costs. So if we take option A being a dual purpose, that means both passengers and research lab, the fixed costs would probably be quite high because we require the additional $20 million for the passenger function. And so that's something that's really important to consider. The variable cost, however, will probably be lower because the fee the passengers pay for the flight will probably be, based on our estimates, be able to cover the day-to-day running of the plane. So it's really big investment right now, future probably lower costs.
Okay, so that's really clear for me, and I think I have a good understanding of that.
Let me tell you about
one thing.
Sure.
Sorry. Do you mind
please.
if I just proceed?
Yes, of course.
There's one thing that I'd like to know because you have emphasised earlier that when if we are proceeding with the customers and the tourism, there is an issue about being associated with Big Pharma. I was wondering if that would be an issue for going forward if we were to go for this single scientific lab.
Well, look, Matthew, it sounds to me like this is a different sphere here. If you do this laboratory thing, you might not need that customer thing. Is there something else as well as that?
In terms of association, I'm just wondering if you're still happy and we're still on the same alignment of organisational values. I just want to check that.
Right. So again, we're really simple to understand insofar as that all we want is to bring a rocket into space.
Okay.
Right. So in terms of whether we are okay with the rocket being named Big Pharma, we really have no problem with that.
Okay.
The only reason why there was a concern was because immediately after the incident with the drug, there was some amount of bad press release, and at least at this stage, we're not able to draw customers to go onto a rocket called Big Pharma. Right? But I'm sure over time, if we manage to get to the issue on reputation, and we manage to find a way in which we can probably counteract the negative press that's out there, or the negative reputation out there, I'm pretty confident this won't be an issue going down the road.
Okay. Look, thank you. That's interesting. It sounds to me like you have addressed all of your points on the agenda actually and are starting to move into options. So what I have heard from the two of you is that you both have a desire to go into space and particularly to take medicine and scientific experiments to help people into space, which is very encouraging to hear from the two of you. Now, I identify that there is also a money issue. Paul, have you heard any other issues other than that?
The way it seems to me is that what's central to both of you in terms of meeting your interests is to get the laboratory-only rocket to work.
Yes.
That seems to be the issue that you're trying to discuss. Because, Mark, what I hear you saying is, given the competitor and given the cost pressure and the limited demand to go into space, it's unlikely that you would really want to pursue that. That it's a costly venture, and that option is unlikely to realise the returns that you would want. From your perspective, your dream is still met if you get a rocket into space.
That's right.
And from your perspective, if you can use a rocket branded the Big Pharma to research drugs from which you can get significant benefit, then that would be a good thing to do together.
Yes.
Yes?
Certainly.
So the question now is, how do you make that work?
Thank you, Paul. It's very good to have your objective insight on this as well, just to oversee what's going on. Look, my client has instructed me to ask if I can have a private caucus with you, the two of us and you. Is that okay
Sure.
at this point?
Sure.
Just be cognizant of the time.
Yes.
Folks. Yeah. Let's go. This is a private conversation. I can't divulge anything unless you instruct me to do that.
Thank you, Paul. So, really the reason why I've called this caucus is I have an idea about how we can work to solve this issue, and it's not really ideal. I was hoping that we would have been able to get to the outcome that would have served both of our interests with the original forecasted expenditure, but that's evident that's not going to be happening. So, in terms of what I can offer today, I'd just like to get your third-party perspective on whether you think that would serve both my interests and ST's interests, and then also, Tunisia, whether you can...
Sorry, to do what?
Whether the options that I'm putting forward would sufficiently meet both our interests, and then, Tunisia, just some advice on my perspective. So really, I do have some revenue, some cash, yeah.
Yes.
So that could be put towards this project, and really, it looks like an opportunity that would be appropriate for that. So really, I have $65 million. So this fund is for preserving and furthering the reputation of my company and for goodwill, and really doing that and spending that on research would be very much in line with what that money is about. In terms of that could help with meeting the further cost. What I'm just concerned about is that I feel like I'm the one who's having to give everything, and my expectation was that wasn't going to be happening, and I don't really feel like I have enough justification for that. But I do have a few ideas about how we can move forward, so I want to know what you think.
But do you know what you want? So if you put another 65 million into this project, are you really clear about what you want?
Well, not the whole 65 million, but in terms of enough to
make it work.
Make it work. Really, I think that will meet my interests in two respects. Firstly, we're able to test that drug and make it happen, and also it's a great goodwill gesture to increase our reputation after the crisis that we've had with Raloxetol. But what do you think about that? Particularly, what do you think the other side would think of that, and how are they perceiving us at the moment?
Well, the way I listen to Mark, his dream is to put a rocket into space. That's what he wants to do. and it seems that he's a bit indifferent as to whether it's got passengers or not. In fact, what he's telling you is the passenger thing is hard to make work from a financial perspective.
Yes.
So if you want this thing to fly, if you want to get it off the ground, then you're now going to have to meet his needs, it would seem.
Yes.
Yes? So if you're going to put something into it, be really clear with him what you want to get out of it.
Great. I think that's probably something that's been lacking so far, so I'll make sure to do that. Tunisia, do you have any thoughts?
Look, Matthew, your bottom line here really is that you need to get value back on the 15 million that you've put in. And it sounds to me like you are very interested in taking your medicine into space. So
I think, yes, in terms of if we have the whole laboratory, the whole rocket ship for lab space, that could provide further benefit for what we can test at one point in time as well. And maybe there are some options about how we can use that rocket in other respects. So maybe I'll have to put that on the table. But
And if this malaria drug is, as you say, and it has the potential that you describe roughly,
yes,
then it's a significant revenue stream for you.
indeed, yes.
on the second issue that you had there, Matthew, I understand your concern about not wanting to just give away everything to the other side and not expecting anything in return. I would advise you, therefore, to remember that you've told me that you're not going to pay back their bank loan. They do have financial hardships at the moment, and this is something that business go through from time to time. But there are some things that it is not up to you to come in and save the day. And what you feel those things may be is up to you. But keep that in mind if you would like to.
Yes. Thank you. I think that's really helped me with clearing up understanding, so perhaps we can get back into joint session rather.
Just remember that you're here to have your interests met.
Yes.
Yes? And what you're trying to do is to find a way to do that.
Great.
Thank you for your indulgence, your time.
Sure.
Look, if you're ready to talk about options, then Matthew is more than happy to start doing that. Look, I advise that in my experience in mediation, the best way to move forward in this phase is actually to just look this way, perhaps not even at each other sometimes, because it can be hard when you're talking to each other to stop yourself and not judge what's being said. So perhaps for a start, just pull out your ideas, anything and everything that you've got, and then you can go into further detail a little bit later on about what that might look like.
Yes,
and evaluate those.
Perhaps you want to say something first, Matthew, after the caucus?
I think before we get into options, that would be preferable. So really, I just want to emphasise that I think I know a lot about your interests, and I am interested in meeting those because I would like to have a partnership relationship over this project, but I need to make sure that my bottom line is met and that my interests are also served. And I want you to realise that I have already put a significant amount of money into this project, and hearing that we need to put in further amount of money, I'm not completely adverse to that idea, but I need to make sure that in terms of that, if that will occur, I will be able to get something more out of that for Big Pharma than what was going to be achieved previously. So I just want to make sure that that's kept in mind.
So what I'm hearing from you is you're not closed off to the idea of playing a role, playing a role in financing this project, maybe even in a larger extent than what you had previously agreed on.
Yes.
But you expect there to be some kind of reciprocity, something you get back in return.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense, but it's hard to commit to something unless I know what it is. So what are you looking for in terms of bigger returns?
Well, I think I'm not looking for anything specific, but I would just like to emphasise that to you so that as we go through options, perhaps you can put up your own ideas about what you can offer, and maybe I'll also throw up some ideas about what might work. So perhaps
I'm very open to that idea. My only reservation is that if we distinguish between what you want and what we want, it might, potentially down the line get a bit one-dimensional, because at this point it looks like what we want seems almost entirely the same.
I agree, and I think that in terms of options, it shouldn't be put out there unless it does serve us in some way and is a mutual package that is both mutually beneficial.
So what would help you? If I stand at the board and take stuff, would that help you?
Yes, please. Look, let's stop
Does
talking about
you want
what...
me to do that?
what this means.
If it helps them, we are agreeable.
Okay, all right, let's do that.
Would you like
Okay.
my marker?
No, actually, I have one. I don't think it's as good as yours, but it'll probably work.
In terms of this process, Paul, I think it'd be most beneficial if we didn't have any premature evaluation, but perhaps, Paul, if you could just clarify before we put anything on the board so that we're both comfortable with it. I wouldn't want anything going up that's...
Let's not discuss these, let's just put them up.
Yes,
let's just
exactly.
get into it, Matthew. What would you like to put on the board?
Well, contribution to meeting the 70 million development cost of a full lab rocket.
Okay. What else?
I think one more thing that we could add to this is possibly how we could brand this. So, you mentioned
Yes.
that reputation is not so big an issue for you, but I understand that the incident has still happened. And, I'm sure that there are ways, even if not to mitigate what has happened to, but to strengthen your reputation even further. And, because your reputation is linked to ours, perhaps that's something we could look at as well. How do we strengthen both our reputations?
That sounds fantastic.
Yes, perhaps a rebranding, perhaps even named after your next drug that is going to be used to help with malaria.
That's certainly an option.
Uh,
There's actually one option that I'd like to put out there. So you have emphasised to me that there are going to be variable costs involved if we do convert to a full scientific lab workshop, less perhaps than before, but they're still going to be there. So there was one idea that I had about how we might be able to meet these costs. So I don't know, Mark, if you're familiar with public-private partnerships, but particularly in areas such as scientific development and public interest issues such as healthcare, often the government is willing to work with us. So perhaps that could be a potential option.
Yep,
And
that's
you're
true.
referring to operational costs.
Operational costs, yes.
All right.
I think in the past, we look at co-financing as finding passengers who are really just transient travelers, who are unpredictable. One way we could get alternative co-funding if we have a single lab is by engaging with other researchers, maybe not rivals, maybe not pharmaceutical companies.
Yes.
So that
And that way, I think normally their testing program is a lot more fixed and a lot more predictable.
more specifically, that could come in under this PPP with the government. Perhaps even, Matthew, I know you work with quite a few universities developing drugs, and so perhaps you could get some funding from universities as well. I'm sure they'd be very interested in taking their experiments
I
there.
think one more thing we want to put on as well is what I like to call social good. I started off by saying that every small step we take must impact mankind as well. And I think we want to also talk about how we can benefit society. So social good.
Great. And in terms of what you mentioned about about the uncertainty of commercial passengers, perhaps there could still be room for maybe one or two passengers on board, but that could be fulfilled by people that have a real passion in what we're doing with the rocket, such as scientific research or government officials or academics, people that would be really interested and perhaps more dependable.
So not people traveling just to blow like 5 million,
No.
but people who are there for a purpose.
People taking it seriously, and we could even have perhaps glass, not glass, I'm not 100% sure, I'm not a spaceship engineer myself, but some kind of transparent surface so they could see what was going on with our testing. That might be a nice option.
Okay. Would these passengers also pay for the trips to space?
Perhaps,
Okay,
certainly
the
not
reason
gonna-
for this is really I'm just thinking of how we can get funding for the rocket.
Yes.
Perhaps we have a few things on the board right now. Perhaps to structure the discussion a bit, we could start with funding. Then we could start with. Then we could continue with perhaps rebranding, reputation, social good, all those sort of issues that come on after the money has been settled. Would
I
that be
think
okay?
that's a great idea, and perhaps I actually just have a few more options I'd like to put out, if that's all right.
Of course.
In terms of,
You want me to stand up again?
I can write it up if you prefer.
I'll
I'll
do
do it if you like.
Thank you very much, Paul. So another option is perhaps we could have a multi-purpose rocket ship that is also mainly a scientific lab, but also can perhaps be reconfigured for downtime when there isn't testing, so it could be used for other purposes. I'm not sure what they might be, but it means it
Well,
might
for
provide an
example,
additional revenue source.
corporate functions for some of your sponsors.
Wow.
University gatherings, those are always fun.
Mediation competitions.
Yes. Yeah.
Mediation competitions.
That's interesting.
Yes.
Government officials, they like to go to fancy things.
Well, I think these are all great ideas. Unless there's any more we'd really like to discuss, which we can
There
focus
is one
on.
more thing that is very important to my client, and I know that it might not be something that is a very nice thing, but Matthew cannot pay your bank loan back, and so if we are to proceed,
So I cannot
pay back the bank loan that ST has taken out, and so would you mind putting up there that ST pays back its own bank loan? Additionally, in regards to the customers that are cancelling, you do need to decide who is going to pay for those refunds, because those refunds really do need to be given.
I think a lot of this deals with this issue of financing, which you're right, is central to the success of this project, and we really want to talk about it. So unless there's anything else, maybe we could start talking about that.
Great, maybe Tunis here we could structure that into some categories just so that we can methodically work through it, perhaps.
Look, you have got a bit of time left, and so actually, perhaps we can meet together again, if that is what you would like to do. So what is the most interesting one to you both at the moment as space fans?
Well, I think really, interesting is nice to talk about, but what's central to the success of this project is financing. We keep coming back to that.
Okay.
And I think that's really how we started and how we are right now as well. At this point, you asked me if we'd like to meet again, and I guess we would. But the only reason why we would meet is if there's a possibility for further partnership. So the only question that I have to ask before that is, do you see yourself playing a role in the financing of this model, a bigger role? I know you've committed to that in the past, but I want that commitment again, because this looks like a lot of money. Mediation competitions are really expensive.
So really my commitment to this project hasn't wavered, and I would be willing to continue contributing. In terms of financing, I really understand that is important, because we won't be able to get it off the ground if we don't do that. So really, I just want to emphasise, and I do have additional funding which I could put towards this project, but the key interest is that it is associated with Big Pharma as a name and a brand. That's one thing I have to emphasise if I am to contribute further funds to that.
Okay, on the topic of funding, perhaps to give some clarity, I think there are mainly three sources that we've identified for funding. One would be private parties, the other one would be the government, and third would be, ourselves. So perhaps you could start, with ourselves, since that's what we're most familiar with. You mentioned you will not be able to repay the bank loan as well as the down payments. Could you explain why this is so?
Those are not my client's obligations. Those obligations belong to you, and so that is not something that Matthew would feel comfortable with just giving away. Looking at the board there are a lot of sources that we have identified together where we could get funding from. And so that is something that you two could continue to talk about.
I think that's a lot of things to talk about in 5 minutes.
Could I add something, please?
Sure, please.
Just to clarify where my counsel is coming from, and what your understanding is, in terms of the down payments, I actually will be honest with you here. I am quite willing to help with those customers. I'm not sure if it will be a financial contribution, but really I don't want them to have a negative outlook on my company or yours. So I'm willing to help there.
You would be willing to help with down payments, but not by helping to repay them. Is that what I'm hearing?
So not the bank loan, but with the down payments, not necessarily paying for them, but if there's another way we can help with those customers, I'm open to many options there.
Okay, we're happy to hear that you're open to helping and to exploring new things to do. I think, in the interest of time, maybe I could just quickly summarize what we have covered during this session, and then we could come up with some things that we can take back and discuss during the next session. Would that be all right?
I think, actually, Paul, just because you've been sitting here as a third party, would it be okay if you summarised where we've gotten to?
Happy to do whatever you want to do.
I think I'd prefer that just for an outlook that is very neutral and refers to both our interests. But I want to assure you, Mark, that I'm really excited about this project and I can't wait to keep working on it with you.
Okay. So what I've heard you say is the way through this is to work together on a laboratory-only space rocket. That's the way through this. You've identified ways in which you think you can fund this. You have some extra funds which you're prepared to put in. You've identified some other sources of funding which need to be explored in order to make this work. You've offered to help how you can in terms of the repayments to to repay the down payments that have already been made. And you've got some other really creative ideas in terms of the multiple use of the laboratory for other people. And so one of the things to explore is what other people might want to use zero gravity effect. Yeah?
Yes.
I'm also, I guess, hearing you say that you're not there yet. There's a lot of unknowns which you've got to sort out. But you can at least leave this meeting knowing that you're prepared to work together to make this refined project work. And you've got a great interest in calling it the Big Pharma and using it as a promotional vehicle for your business.
Certainly.
Yeah?
Okay.
Right. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was an excellent display of mediation in a competitive way, and certainly was competitive. Can we have just now, our judges are leaving the room. They'll judge for the next 15 minutes and then come back. But can we please just have a round of applause for our teams, Mark and Leanne from Singapore University, and Matthew in Tunisia from the University of Auckland. And also Paul, who did a tremendous job keeping them apart when their tensions were high through the things, and his excellent handwriting, which all of us have been able to decipher. So we'll just take a few minutes. The judges will consider their verdict and then come back and we'll be able to announce the prizes. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So we've now come to the final part of our competition with the awarding of the prizes. The judges have deliberated and are back into the room, and so we do have a result. But before we do that, and what we will do in terms of order is fourth, third, second, first, and then we will also, after that, have some additional special commendations to be made. But before that, we're joined, as we mentioned at the start, by His Honour Justice Clyde Croft, who will give us a very short address. But Justice Croft was appointed as judge to the Supreme Court of Victoria in 2009 after a career in international and domestic arbitration and mediation, largely in the property and construction field. Justice Croft was instrumental in the genesis of this competition, and I'd now like to invite him to the stage to say a few words and before we start awarding the prizes, and then I'll call up Peter Mcmullen to commence the prize presentation. So, Justice Croft.
I suppose I should apologise firstly standing between you and the results, but I'd just like to say a few things. It's a great pleasure to be with you this afternoon to see the award to the first place and other teams in the International Chamber of Commerce Australia's Asia Pacific Commercial Mediation Competition, which is the first of its kind in the Asia Pacific region, and perhaps one of the early first in various parts of the world too, I would think. Congratulations to all participants that have competed over the last 3 days, in particular mention to the teams in the final round, which we've just witnessed. It was wonderful to watch. I've learnt a lot about outer space and all sorts of things. It was a very, very good session. It was not too long ago, in April 2014, that I spoke at an ICC Australia event launching the then new ICC Mediation Rules. It's very encouraging to see that they have been embraced by the profession in this region. As judge in charge of 3 lists in the commercial court of the Supreme Court, namely the arbitration list, the taxation list and a general commercial list, I see mediation as often a key component in the management of proceedings before me. From time to time, parties encounter procedural problems in mediation that might, in an international context, easily have been avoided by an agreement to adopt a comprehensive body of rules for the conduct of mediation. This is particularly so with the emergence of a global economy and transnational disputes, where parties to arbitration and mediation come from different nations and possibly different cultures. The facilitation of international trade and alternative dispute resolution procedures is at the heart of the ICC's mission. Founded by a group of visionary industrialists, financiers and traders in the aftermath of the First World War, the ICC has since 1919 taken a central role in forging international dispute resolution rules, mechanisms and standards that are used every day in a rapidly changing world. In a commercial dispute, parties have recourse to a suite of dispute resolution options without resorting to formal court proceedings. Of course, one of those options is arbitration, which, relative to litigation, can be low cost and timely. However, arbitration still has that degree of procedural and substantive complexity and formalism, which makes it slower and more costly than the most efficient dispute resolution process of all, mediation. Mediation is an inherently flexible process that transcends systemic legal formalism. It can quickly take the heat out of disputes, particularly in international commerce, when the dispute may simply be the result of a cultural or other misunderstanding. We all know that domestically mediation has played an important role in dispute resolution for some time. In the commercial court, judges, myself included, are loath to let a matter run to trial without at least one attempt at the matter being mediated. In fact, it would be more rare indeed for a commercial matter in the Supreme Court to proceed to trial without a prior mediation. Mediation allows parties to fashion their own outcomes and potentially reach a settlement outcome that a court could not provide due to the confines of court processes, established law and available remedies at law. For example, this afternoon, I don't think you could get an order for specific performance to build a rocket, much less launch it. In terms of international commerce, the ICC Mediation Rules provide an easy-to-use framework and a comprehensive body of rules for the conduct of a mediation. Due to the ever-expanding global economy and the transnational disputes that can follow, having a set of rules that cannot be seen as favouring any one culture, legal or otherwise, or nation is imperative. The ICC mediation rules represent best practice for the conduct of mediations internationally and provide for a flexible procedure aimed at achieving a negotiated settlement whilst ensuring transparency, efficiency and fairness. ICC Australia has been instrumental in promoting and growing mediation and arbitration in Australia and more broadly in the Asia-Pacific region. Its work deserves the praise and support of the courts and the commercial community domestically and internationally. So thank you for listening to me this afternoon, and I'll now get out of your way and we'll find out what the results are. So best wishes and thank you very much.
So can I first call upon Peter Mcmullen, as Chairman of Judges, also to come up and announce the fourth prize.
Well, thank you, Your Honour, and thank you also, Brian, and thank you all. It's been a magnificent few days, and I want to say that having been a judge in Paris the last few years, and it was the fulfilment of a dream that I had that we would have an Asia-Pacific version of that competition leading into Paris, and a team today will go to Paris as the winners today. It's been a terrific few days. I congratulate all the participants and all the judges. I thank my fellow judges and all the other judges who are here and those who have had to leave already. But they've given their time and they're freely available during these 3 days, and it's been an intense experience, but they've acquitted themselves well. But most importantly, the students have just displayed remarkable capacity, remarkable dexterity, really, in the techniques of mediation. And it is very satisfying from our point of view as organisers that this high level of standard has been achieved in our first inaugural competition. So I've described you as pioneers. I'll do it again. You are the pioneers, and you should be very proud of that. So without further ado, the winner of the fourth place prize, which is right here, if someone could come up from Auckland University of Technology.
And now can I call on Alan Limbury to announce the third place winners. Please, thank you very much.
It's been such a pleasure to be here. I think I'm only one of two people who've been to all the Paris competitions. This is the first one in Australasia. It's got off to a really good start. And it's bringing about generational change. We can all be very proud of that. And I'd like to adapt to that concept. One of the remarks made by Matthew today during the mediation, with all of us here and with the mediator, not even the sky is the limit. So well done. And for the third prize, would somebody please come up from the University of New South Wales?
Thank you. I now invite James Pearson to come up and announce the second place winner, which is a $500 cash prize from the Australasian Dispute Resolution Centre as a component.
Thank you, Brian. Now, of course, there is a consequence of me announcing this prize. And before I do, I want to say that as someone who, and it might surprise you some in the room to know this is the first time I've witnessed a commercial mediation. I had no idea it could be so entertaining. I had no idea it could have so much emotion as well as so much fact. And I had no idea that I would find myself barracking for both teams right until the end. But unfortunately, there can only be one winner, and that means only one second place. But I would say to the second place holders that they performed extremely well, and on another day, I have no doubt that you would be winners too. The University of Auckland, well done.
I think I can be trusted. It's not like the Academy Awards. so it gives me great pleasure to invite a representative from the University of Singapore as the first prize winner.
Can I just invite the remaining members of the University of Technology in Auckland to come up to the stage as well, so we can have a complete photo. Thank you. Thank you all. Now we do have some other prizes to award as well, and so very shortly can I invite Donna Ross to come up from the Resolution Institute to present your prize for, is this it? Yes, you do it.
Good afternoon. ladies and gentlemen. This is a great pleasure and honor. We've had so many excellent participants here, some of whom have won prizes. As many of you may know, I'm representing Resolution Institute here. I'm the chair, actually, of the Arbitration Committee in Victoria, and I'm also the chapter chair. So on behalf of Resolution Institute, which is a national body, national and actually somewhat multinational because it covers Australia and New Zealand, I have an additional prize to present to the best team from Australia and New Zealand. And just very briefly, for those of you who aren't familiar with the name and the logo, Resolution Institute is the merger of what was formerly Leader and IAMA, the two of the major national arbitration and mediation institutions in Australia and New Zealand. So it is my great pleasure now to present to the University of Auckland, which makes it very easy because you're right here, the Resolution Institute Prize, which is a voucher for each of you for something I'm not sure that you need. It's a 5-day mediation training. You've done so well, but I'm sure that this will enable you to do even better. It also meets the requirements for national accreditation and comes along with a 12-month graduate membership to Resolution Institute. So for each of the 4 members of the University of Auckland team, you might have come in second, but you are also coming in first in one way. So.
Thanks very much. We perhaps weren't as specific as we should have been as well, noting that first prize was, of course, automatic entry into the Paris competition in February next year. I'd now like to invite Jerome Jolson to the stage to present the Victorian Bar Prize of Honour in honour of the late Henry Jolson QC.
Okay, and the prize goes to the Monash University team of 4.
Team 4.
Team 4.
And finally, can I call back to the stage Peter Mcmullen to present the Cornwall Stoddart Prize.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Cornwall Stoddart has been the sponsor of this event, and I have dual role here as representing Cornwall Stoddart as well as the judges, as well as everyone really. I'm very pleased to announce that the winner of the Cornwall Stoddart Prize is Victoria University of Wellington.
And last but not least, can I invite Delcy Lagonsta-Anglam from Uncitrol to present the Uncitrol Prize, please.
Thank you. I'm going to stand here with another hat, which is an executive director of Uncitrol Committee Australia. And I'm just going to say very briefly that I want to share with you, one of the students said this morning, mediation opens doors that litigation closes. I thought that was really nice. So I'm presenting these 3 books written by a number of experts in dispute resolution in the Asia-Pacific region. And it is produced by Uncitrol. This is the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law. So for whom are these? Okay, Jindal Global University. I would also like to thank, on behalf of everybody, I think, to a lady who put all this together and without whom we could have not eaten on time and done all these things. Heidi, please.
And so that brings us to the conclusion. Thank you very much to everyone who's contributed to the organising committee, the teams, the team that sat behind us, the expertise which we gained from all of the judges and universities that had participated in the Paris event that enabled us to replicate that here today, or over the last few days. So thank you very much to everybody who's done that. Please join us for some light refreshments and some drinks outside as a social event. A reminder to everyone that participants, there are certificates, volunteers, there are certificates which are laid out on the tables there. The one facing lengthways this way is for the students and the one going crossways is for the volunteers, but for everyone who's made a contribution, there's a certificate. So thank you very much to everyone. Please join us now for a social drink afterwards.